is Carly Bigelow. I'm here doing the French horn audition tutorial for the Ontario Provincial Honor Band. So before we begin playing, I just want to talk a little bit about breathing. It's very important that you take a really full, deep breath because it's going to help with your tone, it's going to help with endurance, it's going to help with so many different things. So when you're breathing, I'm sure everybody, you've all heard that you should use your stomach when you breathe. And that's true. When I think about breathing, I like to think about relaxing the jaw. You want to relax your throat as well. If you get any sounds like any of those restriction sounds, you know you're not completely relaxed. And when you inhale, you want to think about expanding every single direction. So when I breathe in, I like to think about my back coming out. I like to think about my sides coming out, like my front coming out, and even my chest opening up. So you want to be able to get in as much air and fill it to like max capacity as fast as possible. A little trick I've learned is this is the top of just a water bottle. If you just cut off the top, and if you breathe through this, you find that you're able to like fill up so fast. And for me, like that's the ideal breath. I have no idea why this works, but it really does. So if you have a plastic water bottle at home, I'd suggest just cutting off the top and giving that a go. Okay, so now let's get into some of the playing. So the first thing you're gonna do on your audition is you're going to record your scales. And the first scale up is an F chromatic scale. I find when learning scales, it's really important to start practicing them slowly. And that way you can build a really strong foundation and then speed them up gradually over time. So this one is F chromatic scale. I always play that lower F on the thumb key, so on the B flat side, and then switch over to the F side. In the first octave, so what you want to do is you want to take a really big, deep breath because it's going to help with your tone, it's going to help with playing high, it's going to help with so many things. And you want to play really, really, really slowly. Think about like each note before you play it, and then through time you'll be able just to like play it really fast without thinking. So here's the first octave. Things to think about is when you're going up to the high F, you really want to think about speeding the air up. You want to think about having really good support, and that way your sound will be nice up in the high range. You'll be able to get those notes effortlessly. So the next scale you have to play is the G major scale, and this one's different because it's tongued. So instead of having this nice legato slur, you're going to make like a toe sound. And you really want to work on getting like the beginning of the notes clear. And a good way to practice this is with air attacks or with like isolating them, just making sure you get a really nice ping at the beginning. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to think about the notes. I want to really start practicing it slowly at the beginning. And when you crescendo in the high range, when you think about speeding the air up, you'll get like a really big sound. But if you don't, sometimes you'll get a bit of a pinch sound, and that's something to watch out for. Like listen to yourself. Do I sound good in all registers? That's something we easily forget when we're working on technique. We forget about making a nice sound or about how we sound to the audience. We're so wrapped up in what our fingers are doing. So the next scale is you have the 1 octave or the 2 octave option. The first octave, this is the first octave. And for the next octave, it's quite high, so things that I would suggest practicing, I'd practice it slurred at first. This way you're ensuring that your air's flowing through the instrument. Sometimes when you add the tongue, it can get, like you can cut off the airflow. So a good way to practice it, just slur up to that high B flat. And you really want to think about like inflating those high notes. Because if you don't, sometimes you'll get a bit of a pinch sound and it'll sound kind of like this. Like you're still hitting the notes, but it sounds kind of smaller, kind of shrill up there. And then after practicing it slurred, then you can add in the tongue and make the whole scale. And I would recommend practicing the 2 octaves, and then when it comes time to recording, if you're still not up there yet, maybe don't put it on the tape, but definitely in the beginning, practice getting up there. It'll only improve your range, and that can't be a bad thing. So let's move on to some of the excerpts. Okay, so this is Etude number 1. Things you want to think about before you play is that you always want to have the time consistent. It's really hard to do this when you're doing recordings, when you're doing live auditions, because you don't have anyone else to play with. You have to rely on yourself to keep this steady time. So little tips for that are obviously practice with a metronome, but also if you count yourself in, you'll find that you have more odds of starting at the tempo you want. And if you keep time in your head as you're going, kind of like a ticker track, I always have like a 1 and 2 and 3 and always going on as I'm playing to try and like keep me on track. So this one, things to notice. All right, it starts off piano, and then we have this crescendo going into bar 4. But also what you want to do is you want to subdivide this dotted 8th, 16th note correctly. So when you come to it, you want to think 1 E and da, and then you're going to move on the da. You always want to make sure, because sometimes you always want to make sure that that's accurate, because sometimes it'll start to feel a little bit triplety if you're not paying attention as much. So something to watch out for. So this is the opening. I'm going to start piano. I'm going to take a really big breath, and I'm going to keep time in my head. And this part's a little bit trickier because you're going to have to get up to the high A. Little tips for that is try practicing the A down the octave just so you can get it in your head a bit before you play it. And always try to think of the note. Like when I start, I'm going to think, if I could sing that high, I'd sing it for you, but you want to get that pitch in your head so you know where you're aiming. You're not just like going up there. You know exactly where you want to be. And again, you want to speed the air up and have really good support. And again, I forgot to say something about the A. What you want to think about is, if you're having a hard time getting up there, just practice like slurring up there a couple times, like starting on the B, then playing the D, and then going up to the A, so you can get familiar with the pitches, you know where it's going. Just take it at a time and practice it. So this next part up at this next part at 9, and this is where we change to a forte. And we're going from piano to forte, so you want this to be quite drastic. You really want to hear this dynamic change. We started very quiet, very personal, but now we're going to come out and play a good, strong forte. In this ending, you want to keep it forte throughout the whole time. So you don't have any, other than a crescendo, decrescendo at 14, then you don't have another dynamic marking. It is very, the tendency is to kind of fall away from the forte, but you want to keep it going, keep it forte all the way to the end. This next one is Camille Saint-Saëns' Morceau de Concert. It's an excerpt from that, this Etude 2. So I would suggest going on YouTube to listening to it, or buying it off of iTunes. This is one of the variations. I can't remember which one. But I would strongly suggest listening to it. And this way, it'll also help you keep the time because you know what's going on in the background. You know like who you're playing with, what's happening. So this one, we're in a 3/4 and we've got triplets. The tricky thing about triplets is playing them even. So if you have a metronome or one of the subdividing metronomes, that's a really good idea. And this is very technical, so I'd suggest practicing it really slowly at first, maybe like sectioning it off. Like I would play bar 1 and bar 2 a couple times and like nice and slow, get used to it, and then play 3 and 4 a couple times slowly, get it, because you really want it under your fingers for when you go to record. And again, this part's piano, so I'm going to play it like soft. I kind of think of it like mysterious, a little bit sneaky. And that pickup into bar 3, this is not a triplet, this is a straight 8th, so you want it to be like that's just something to know, so it's like a slightly bit longer than the triplets. And then here at bar 9, again, we're going to come out with a full forte. So you want this to be dramatically different from the piano. And this, like a good way to practice all these little intricate parts is really playing them slowly, which I'm going to demonstrate here at 13. So if I'm just beginning to learn this, this would be how I would start practicing it at this tempo. So you want to play it really, really, really slowly and like get every single note. You don't want to be like glazing over some of them from practicing it too quickly. So this is the ending. And again, that whole ending should be forte. It should be actually a little bit louder than forte, so you'll see you have a crescendo before bar 13. So again, things to remember, you want to take a really big breath, you want to keep time in your head, you want to make sure that your triplets are even, you want to make sure there's a difference between your 8ths and your triplets, and you want to practice them slowly so you really get them under your fingers. This one's a little bit tricky. So let's move on to Etude number 3. This one is very lyrical, very like romantic style. And you have expressivo, quarter note equals 48. This one, there's a lot of fast passages, so my suggestion would be isolating them. Like bar 1, 2, bar 3, the first like 3 beats of the 6/8. You really want to like take that apart and practice that. Practice it with all the accidentals. Because this excerpt is very intricate. You have a lot of dynamic changes. You've got accents, you've got a retardando. You want to make sure that you're getting all of these. This is what the piano's going to be listening for. But I love this one. It's very almost singing style. And here you have another big leap. So a good way to practice this would be just practice slurring from the D up until the F sharp. Just to get it in your ear and get kind of used to it. Like really gliss it up there. And do that a couple times and then play it. And here we go back to, there's no dynamic marking at the beginning, but I always think it's kind of like a piano. So here we're going to bring it back into a piano. And we have an accent. You really want to make sure that the piano can hear that accent. And here you have a retardando, and I really like to really bring it back. I feel like this is romantic. You have rubato going on, so really make a meal out of this rit. And then after the rit at bar 12, you want to make sure you're right back in tempo. And here at 19, you have this funny articulation. You have staccatos underneath the slur. And this is one of the ambiguous articulation markings that you'll get. I always think of it, because staccato obviously means detached, and then with the slur it means like attached and as smooth as possible. I always think of it as trying to make the notes as connected as possible with like the slightest hint of definition or articulation in between. So really try and make them like long. And looking ahead, we see in bar 20 we have 1 bar to crescendo into a forte, and we're at mezzo piano, so you really want to get up there and dynamic. And so you want to keep it forte to the end, and again you have these staccatos underneath the slurs. You want to make them as long as possible, but still like the hint of articulation in there. So things to remember for these excerpts, or this excerpt in particular, is you want to make it, try and imagine yourself singing it, or maybe even practice singing it if you like to sing. I want to make sure you get all the little details. So if you see a crescendo, you want to make sure that when you're listening to a recording, you can hear that crescendo. If you see an accent, like, can I hear that accent? And that's something that you'll discover when you're starting to record it. So I would suggest starting to record it a couple days or a couple weeks, definitely weeks, not days, before the actual audition is due. Because as you start listening to yourself, you'll be like, oh, I thought I was doing this more than I am. Like, you'll find like all these things that you weren't hearing before. So give yourself like 2 weeks maybe. I wish you all the best. I hope you have some little helpful hints to take away to help you better prepare yourself for the audition. And yes, good luck. Thank you.
And we don't care about the young folks.